The difference between an amateur writer and a professional is good editing. You have finished your manuscript and now you're ready to publish. But hold on a minute. Before you're ready to push the publish button, there is something you need to do that is essential to make sure that your work stands the test of time, finishes your book, they keep coming back for more. And that missing ingredient is editing. Editing is something that most people do not think of when they think about writing, and it's something that like an invisible art. If you do it well, nobody notices it, but if you don't do it well, then that can ruin your whole book. So how do you go about editing a book? My name is Deepak Thomas. I write fantasy and science fiction books based on Indian culture and history. And today I want to talk about the hidden art of editing in your books. I have written 2 books so far with a third on the way. And over these last 3 books, I have fine-tuned my approach to editing, and I would like to share my guide with you along with some resources and tips that you can use as an upcoming author yourself. So once you finish the completed draft of your book and the story is finalized, the first thing you need to do is something called self-editing. Self-editing is, as it sounds, you on your own editing the book. These can be basic prose edits. So this is the last part of your editing process. This is the part where you start polishing up your language, where you start fixing all sorts of grammatical errors and also make stylistic choices to make your book flow better. For example, one of the key things that I changed during this time is removing all kinds of dialogue tags and adverbs. Dialogue tags are adverbs that you put at the end of a dialogue. For example, when you say, "I lost my keys," he said angrily. The part "he said angrily" is a dialogue tag. Now in the self-editing portion is where I remove the word angrily and instead make my dialogues itself convey anger. So this is one of the things I do during my self-editing process. Other things are more basic, like making the sentence flow better, fixing grammar, making sure that the dialogues carry punch, looking at how the language is flowing. These kind of changes are a lot of stylistic changes that you can learn to do. A great resource that helped me learn how to do self-editing is Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. I'll drop a link in the description for the book. I highly recommend it to you if you're an upcoming author. It has so many great tips and so many actionable ways to improve your writing. Once you finish writing your manuscript, check out that book. Look at all the steps that it mentions. It also has a handy checklist. Follow that checklist and start editing your book. Once self-editing is done, this is the part where you go into the second step, which is copy editing. For copy editing, you have to hire someone else. The reason is something called tunnel vision. So when you keep working on a draft for a book, you start missing out on simple typos and grammar mistakes. So copy editing is the process of editing your book for grammar issues, looking at ways to improve your sentences and your prose, and also looking at any kind of logical inconsistencies. For example, if you have a paragraph in which it is night and in the next paragraph suddenly the sun's out, these are things that the copy editor will pick up. On the other hand, grammatical issues, using the wrong word in the wrong place, these are also things that copy editors pick up as well. I highly recommend hiring a proper copy editor, someone with a lot of real world experience and not just someone on Fiverr who will do it for $50. I use a website called Readsy. My go-to copy editor is Anna Bowles. Again, I link to her profile in the description. Be warned, copy editing is one of the more expensive parts of producing a book. If you're not able to afford copy editing, it's okay, skip it. But if you can, you should. It's one of those things that really elevate your book. So don't let the fact that you can't afford copy editing hold back the release of your book. But if you can afford it, please do it. It's a really critical step in polishing up your work. The third type of editing that I do in my process is proofreading. Proofreading is different from copy editing. This is where your almost final clean draft goes to a third person to review. Don't let your copy editor proofread your book. Don't do it yourself. Don't let your alpha readers do it. Give it to someone who is seeing it with a fresh pair of eyes. Only then will they be able to identify a lot of the typos, a lot of the grammar mistakes that the copy editor and you missed out. Now you might be wondering, if a copy editor and you yourself have already done 2 rounds of editing, why do you need to hire a third person? Again, it goes back to the idea of a tunnel vision. When you keep working for many years on something, there are many easy to miss details that just skip your eyes. That's when you become very familiar with something. You don't see obvious glaring errors. So hire a person. For this one, I would recommend you do go to a site like Fiverr and Upwork, and you don't need to hire someone who is really qualified, just someone who is very comfortable speaking English, just to see obvious glaring mistakes. Again, I have a go-to person for my proofreading needs. I link them in the description as well. You can check them out. None of them are paying me to pitch them, by the way. This is just me having worked with them and I trust them. So you can go check them out as well. And this one also shouldn't be too expensive. And again, if you couldn't afford a copy edit, that's fine. But most likely you should still be able to afford a proofreader. Get a proofreader to go through your work after you're done with it. I'm telling you, it'll make a huge difference in terms of how your reader perceive your work. These are the 3 edits that I do as part of my process. There are 2 more edits that a lot of people who can afford it do it. I would only recommend these 2 steps to you if, one, you have a lot of money to spare and you can splurge, or if you're already at an advanced level in your writing and your books are selling well, then I can also recommend these to you. The first one of these type of editings is developmental editing. Developmental edits are not about your language or your grammar, they're about your story. So a developmental editor is usually someone who has a lot of experience working with successful authors, people who have published many books. With experience, they know what story works, what aspects of your story mechanics are not working, and they can give you some really good feedback. So these, as you can imagine, since these are experienced editors, a developmental editor costs a lot, sometimes up to lakhs of rupees. So again, I wouldn't recommend this to someone if you're an upcoming author. You wouldn't be able to use this very well. So even I don't use a developmental editor. But if you're someone who is very successful, or like I said, if you have a lot of money lying around and you want to invest in your storytelling abilities, go ahead, hire a developmental editor. And developmental editing usually happens even before your self-editing step. So ideally, after you're done with your second draft, you share it with a developmental editor. So this is something you can consider. And the 5th type of editing is line editing. Now, line editing is an advanced form of copy edit where they go in line by line and make sure all of your sentences are as strong and punchy as possible. This is not just about making sure your grammar is correct. It is about making sure you use the right words, about making those beautiful lyrical prose. This is where that step happens. Again, if you are just an upcoming author, a line edit is not what you need to be looking for. These are usually for authors who have reached a very high level with their writing and they want to go to the next step. And line edits are again usually very expensive, and it's something for which you need to hire someone with a lot of real world experience. So I recommend that you do not, or you skip this step unless you are really high up on the writing food chain. So these are the 5 types of editing that most authors can go for. So self-editing, copy editing and proofreading is something I recommend to everyone to do it. Again, if you can't afford it, don't let it hold back your release of your book. But if you can, please do it. On the other hand, developmental editing and line editing are things that are more of luxuries, more of things that you do at an advanced level. Editing, like I said before, is an invisible art. If you do it well, nobody should notice it. But if you do it poorly, that's the only thing people will notice in your work. So if you are serious about writing, I highly recommend you invest in editing. You invest in your own ability to edit work as well. So that's why go into different resources, learn how to use your language well, and hopefully that will help you become a much better writer. Irrespective of whether you're trying to traditionally publish or you're trying to self-publish, go through the first 3 steps. Today, a lot of traditional publishing also requires you to create or to give them a very clean manuscript so that the steps between receiving the manuscript and publishing is shortened. So even if you are one of those people who are just pitching to traditional publishing, I highly recommend you do it. And if you're a self-publisher, then you definitely have to do these steps. In my next video, I will talk more about the differences between traditional and self-publishing, and I'll give you my process on how I self-publish my books as an Indian author. Subscribe if you want to hear more about that. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, please check out my free novella, link in description. Check out the earlier video where I talked more about my process on how I write a novel. You can check out this video somewhere over here. And till then, keep writing, keep reading, and have a great day.